All right, good morning, everyone. Jacob, thank you so much for going ahead and press the record button. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's session. I see that it's 10 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. Um, as you see in the slide in front of you, the topic of today's session is part two of FML, ADA, and workers' comp. This is the second of our quarterly trainings on leave administration. We decided to roll out trainings on this topic because our review of information supported that there was a need. We do plan on rolling out more trainings in the upcoming quarters, so keep an ear and eye out for more information. Before I get into the agenda slide, I have a question that I'd like to ask of the audience to get an idea of who was able to join us in the June session and who, for whom this is your first time joining. So if you could respond to the poll question that shows in front of you, and then we should see the results once everyone responds. All right, so I see that so far, and the numbers are changing, but most were not able to join us in June. And about 40% of you were, so that's great to hear. Welcome to everyone who is with us today. I wouldn't say you had to join the first session to follow along with this one. It's just a continuation of our look at FML, ADA, and workers' comp. Do know as I get into my session of my part of today's presentation, I'll cover for those of you who weren't able to join us in June, I'll cover how I'll get that information to you. But we were able to cover quite a bit of good, helpful information in the June session from FML and ADA resources, adding time to the employee profile in the system, tracking FML. The goal had also been to cover workers' comp during the June session, but given a last minute issue that didn't occur, but we were able to schedule the workers' comp program officer for this session. So there is some good information that will be shared on workers' comp for this session. All right, so this slide here shows the agenda slide. After I finish with the intro, we'll have part one, a closer look at the services provided by one of the ADA resources that we touched on in the June session, and this is a job accommodation network. In part two, we'll take a look at workers' comp information, starting with a look at safety and workers' comp at tiers 1 and 2, and then working through the items and ending with a look at recovery at tier 3. And in part three, we'll look at some FML and ADA scenarios. All right, so today's speakers I've listed in order of the material presented. So Tracy DeFreitas, the program leader, director of training, services, and outreach for the Job Accommodation Network. She'll be covering part one, which is information on the services provided by Jan. Part two will be covered by Kim Oliver, the Workers' Comp Program Officer here within DOAS. And part three, I will cover the FML ADA scenarios. I'm Latasha West, the DOAS HRA Policy Manager. And for those of you, any of you who have questions after today's session, I've listed the email addresses for each of the speakers. Tracy, if you're on and if you can hear me, know that I just listed the Jan email address, but I'm sure there's other contact information that you'll touch on as you get into your material. All right, so just a few housekeeping items. As you all saw when you joined today's session, you were muted, mics disabled. That's just to ensure that we minimize any disruptions as we work our way through the information. But of course, if there are questions, comments, do feel free to submit in chat and we'll get to those as soon and as often as we can throughout the session. You'll want to close out Outlook and other internet sites to avoid any connectivity issues on your ends. And also know that after today's session, I will be providing a recording link and slides for the session. All right, so at this point, I will turn things over to Tracy DeFreitas with the Job Accommodation Network. I'm trying to see if she's joined us. I don't yet see her. Let me work my way through my list of people who joined.
I see her listed, but she's currently listed as an attendee instead of a presenter. Should I make her a presenter real quick?
Yes, if you can do that, please do that.
Got it.
Okay,
Hi
wonderful.
there. Thank you.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you so much for joining us today. So I have stopped sharing so that you
Okay.
can share your screen, and I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Latasha. Appreciate it. Give me just one moment to get situated here, and we should be good to go. All right. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Latasha, for the opportunity to speak during this quarterly meeting. I am Tracy DeFreitas, as mentioned, with the Job Accommodation Network, or JAN. I am here to offer some information about the JAN service so that hopefully you can walk away knowing that you do have a national free service available to you to help be your partner in the accommodation process. I'll go ahead and jump right in and talk a bit about the service. JAN, or the Job Accommodation Network, or JAN, was established in 1983. We've actually been around for quite some time. This month, we are celebrating our 40th year of service. We were originally set up as a national service to provide information that about employers who are providing accommodations for individuals with disabilities. The service has evolved some throughout the years, but at this time, we are here to be a national consulting service that's available free of charge to employers as well as others, and I'll get into that here in a minute. We are a service that is funded by the U.S. government through the U.S. Department of Labor, through the Office of Disability Employment Policy, and we always have been funded by a federal grant or contract, depending upon the situation. And we're situated in Morgantown, West Virginia, at West Virginia University. So while we have one office, one location in West Virginia, we do serve the entire country by providing consultation services. Our mission is to essentially help employers recognize the valuable contributions that qualified workers with disabilities add to the workforce. And we do this by providing accommodation solutions, trusted strategies on how to engage in the accommodation process, and also practical guidance on the Title I provisions of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We know that job accommodations play a vital role in creating inclusive workplaces and advancing the goals of the ADA, and ultimately increasing employment opportunities for people with disabilities. So we stick to that mission, and we do that by being a partner in the accommodation process. We know that people can be in various places in that process in terms of their knowledge and their experience, and we meet you wherever you are in working with individuals with disabilities to ensure that they have the tools, the adjustments that they need in order to bring their whole self to work and to be successful on the job. So we're there to kind of help you along the way. We do provide practical guidance and technical assistance for employers, people with disabilities, and others in trying to work toward engaging in that interactive accommodation process. So we offer sort of strategies and tips for ways to go about doing that on an individual basis. So we do provide that one-on-one technical assistance, working with you in your unique situation to think about, what sort of health condition or disability is involved, what sort of work is involved, the type of environment and the tasks included in a situation, and then also the various ADA and accommodation issues that come into play and kind of helping you sort through those. Some people might be very skilled and knowledgeable in terms of engaging in that process and maybe just need a sounding board or somebody to kind of discuss their ideas with. Others might need a little bit more support in that process and might need to brainstorm accommodation solutions, or they might need some ADA guidance to help support the decisions that are being made around accommodation. So that's where Jan can help. We do provide accommodation solutions on a one-by-one basis. We offer a lot of general information regarding various accommodation ideas related to specific types of health conditions, limitations, that kind of thing. But really where we shine is kind of working with you in your individual circumstances to brainstorm ideas and refer you to resources that can help as well. From an ADA standpoint, we don't provide legal guidance, but what we do is provide you with information provided by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So we work very much from the enforcement guidance resources that EEOC offers to help employers understand their responsibilities under the ADA, as well as individuals in understanding their rights under the law too. We're not going to help you make legal decisions, but we're going to give you information to help you decide how to comply with the ADA, and sometimes how to go beyond compliance in order to make accommodations where that makes sense. We also have a small self-employment service that is available to individuals with disabilities who are looking for other ways to other forms of employment, I would say. So if they're interested in creating their own business rather than working for someone else, then that is an option, and we can certainly help with that too. With this consultation that we provide, who can benefit? Know that employers are our primary audience because we do know that employers are making the accommodation decisions. They're hiring and retaining and advancing people with disabilities in the workplace. And so ultimately, they're our primary audience. However, Jan is a service that's available to anyone who has questions. So if you're an individual with a disability, if you are a rehabilitation, a medical, a legal, or educational professional, a family member of somebody with a disability, we are here to answer your ADA and accommodation questions, whoever you might be. Now, in terms of working with employers, we know that, you're going to need help with seeking accommodation solutions, with engaging in that accommodation process. You might need referrals to equipment and services that you can access in order to provide accommodations. And so that's the kind of information we can offer. We are available to all audiences, and there are lots of different ways to get in touch with the JAN service. We're very accessible. We, of course, have the askjan.org website. That's askjan.org. And I'll go into that site a little bit more in just a moment. But we also have a toll-free service where you can contact us by telephone and speak directly with a consultant regarding your particular situation. As another option, you can also use our live chat feature that's available on our website. So all you need to do is hop on the website and click on the live chat button, and you'll be ultimately connected with a consultant who can answer your questions. If you rather, you can also send in an email. And Latasha, I heard you mention the email that you posted there, and that the general Jan email is just fine. So people can contact us at jan@askjan.org. Of course, you can go to the askjan.org site for more information about how to contact us. If you're not already doing so, we do encourage you to follow us on social media as well. We do offer a lot of timely information and resources via Facebook, LinkedIn, and X or Twitter. And so I do encourage you to certainly follow us there. Now, I'd just like to kind of give you an idea of what it might look like when you contact the JAN service. I mentioned it's free, it's available to everyone, and that we're very accessible. But what does that look like? Whatever method you choose to contact us, whether it's a call or a live chat or an email, the first contact is going to be with our frontline staff. So what we call our program assistants. What they do is collect some information from you, demographic information, for example. They might ask you a few questions about the reason for your call or your chat or your email. They will do that to kind of gather information about the health condition or the specific limitations, or maybe your specific ADA or accommodation question. And the reason they do this is because they're going to then decide to whom to route your contact. So our consultants work in specialty areas. We have teams. And so for that reason, it helps us to know a little bit about your contact in order to figure out who's the best and available person to go ahead and provide you that one-on-one assistance. So when you contact Jan, it is helpful to know information about the type of disability that's involved, the work-related duties and environments, and any specific questions that you might have when you contact us. When the program assistant gets that information, we have a routing system set up where they will identify an appropriate team member. Those teams, we have a motor mobility team, a sensory team, a cognitive neurological team, and an ADA team. And so they'll determine which team is most appropriate and then ultimately who's available at that time. We do have multiple people on those teams with different availability, of course. But then you will go ahead and communicate directly with that consultant. They will ask you a lot of questions, try to assess the situation, uh, talk through the scenario with you, and then ultimately offer you some ideas and Jan resources or other resources that might be helpful in working through that accommodation situation. So pretty easy. We make it pretty simple and accessible. And so there's no reason not to contact us because you will get to speak with somebody and get your questions answered, hopefully. And, there might be times where we don't have a specific answer to your question. Sometimes it's just not a very clear cut scenario, but we might be able to refer you also to other resources that can provide additional support. Now, just to kind of illustrate that a little bit further, I'd like to offer some examples so that you can see, what sort of scenarios might be posed to us and then ultimately what kind of information is provided. So here we have an example of somebody who has long COVID, a business consultant. So an employer contacted us about a business consultant who has long COVID and anxiety, and they were concerned about contracting COVID again and having an exacerbation of their long COVID related symptoms. This person's job duties did require some face to face contact with clients. And so they wanted to really kind of figure out, how are we going to make this work? How are we going to ensure that this person isn't likely to be exposed again? In this case, the employer talked with the Jane consultant, and there are various ideas that we might throw out there, but keep in mind it's always going to be up to the employer to decide what's the best solution to consider given the situation. So, whereas we might give you various options, the employer has the right to choose among available and effective reasonable accommodation solutions. In this particular scenario, they came up with sort of a hybrid scenario where the individual was able to work part time at home to kind of reduce their need to come on site. But then also, when there were some situations where the individual needed to work directly on site with clients, they implemented some safety protocols to limit the employee's risk of exposure to COVID when working directly with clients on site. To give you an idea of some resources, we have an A to Z section of our site that offers key accommodation solutions by health condition. So in this instance, A to Z anxiety, A to Z long COVID, those were resources that were offered. We also oftentimes create publications and resources on specific topics. So in this case, there is a resource around accommodation strategies for returning to the workplace that offers a lot of key accommodation ideas as a way to sort of limit exposure in the work environment. So here, lots of different options and resources were offered, and they were able to come up with a workable solution for that employee. Another example related to pregnancy, here we have a quality inspector for a manufacturing facility who was experiencing some painful swelling in their legs and ankles and feet during the pregnancy. The job did require some standing for long periods of time, and the employee needed to be somewhat mobile around the facility. And so the employer was looking for ways to accommodate this person to enable them to continue working during the pregnancy. Now, keeping in mind that these accommodations in this instance are most likely to be temporary types of accommodations. Here, the employer was able to provide a stand lean stool that enabled the employee to get off their feet a little bit while they needed to be standing, for example. They also added some anti-fatigue matting in the work area where they would be standing a lot, and then permitted the employee to take rest breaks where they could put their feet up every now and then. So this would enable the person to continue working and manage their symptoms related to the pregnancy. In this case, we also have an A to Z on pregnancy that offers key accommodation solutions. It also references several of the federal laws that come into play around pregnancy because there are several laws to keep in mind. Of course, we focus on the Americans with Disabilities Act, but we also get a lot of questions around other types of laws like the Family and Medical Leave Act, and now the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, which is a new law that is in effect and does require accommodations for pregnant workers. So another topic type resource we have here is a resource related to preparing for accommodation requests from workers who are pregnant. One last example, here we have a case manager with ADHD who had difficulty completing documentation. This person worked in a cubicle, a noisy open work environment, which is a pretty common work environment. And in this case, the noise and the commotion affected this person's ability to focus and concentrate. In this instance, there wasn't private space available, and I'm guessing that in this consultation, maybe telework probably was not a solution that was available. So they explored some other possibilities. Now, keep in mind, every situation is different, and the accommodations that make sense will vary according to each situation. In this case, there was a consideration of a flexible work arrangement. So with that, the individual was permitted to come into work 2 hours early every day, so before most people were in the work environment, which cut down on that noise and commotion and ultimately allowed that person to focus a bit better. A real simple modification that really made a big difference in terms of helping with that person's focus and mental acuity. Here again, we have some more A to Z resources on ADHD and neurodiversity. And then we have a really great pub that I think I give out a lot on executive functioning related deficits and accommodations. So it offers a lot of ideas around concentration, memory, organization, and prioritization. So that's a really good resource that we certainly give out a lot. So I give these examples to just give you an idea of some of the kinds of situations that we hear about at JAN and accommodations that might be presented or implemented, I would say, and the resources that are available. So hopefully it kind of gives you a better understanding of what we might talk with people about. I'd also like to point out our website. Now, given there are lots of ways to contact us and you can get that one-on-one consultation, but some people prefer to just kind of look around on their own and find resources and explore our website. So you can certainly do that as an alternative to that direct consultation. Our website is very extensive. At askjan.org, you will find information that is dedicated to interests of employers as well as individuals. We have that A to Z site that I mentioned, and with that A to Z, you can go ahead and search on a lot of different topics. You can search by disability, limitation, accommodation, and so it just gives you an opportunity to look for information in various ways. I'll talk more about that in a second. We also have an ADA library where we keep the ADA regulations and other resources that might be helpful, including a page dedicated to the EEOC enforcement guidance documents that might be relevant. It's a full list of all those guidance documents that can be helpful, particularly in the accommodation process. We have just a page that has all of our publications listed. We have the MyJan, which I'll talk about in a second. And then also we have a training page that includes resources that can be used for just-in-time training for groups or individuals who just need more information on ADA and accommodation topics. So I would encourage you to go there. You can look around. I would say that if you don't find what you're looking for, though, that's when it's probably a good idea to contact us directly. On the homepage, you will find where we keep some Jan updates, some featured resources and events. So when we produce a new resource, we will go ahead and post it directly there on the homepage. So for example, we have a newsletter that we post. It's generally monthly. We just released one last week in September that actually commemorates the 40th anniversary of the Jan service. And you can sign up to receive that newsletter whenever it does come out via our Jan updates option. We also, if we post a new resource like our Consultants Corner or a blog or a new A to Z page, we'll go ahead and add it here. We also have quick access to our webcast series as well, and I'll talk about that again in a second. Just to kind of point out some of those resources, I mentioned we have a page that's dedicated to employers. There we've curated a list of Jan resources and other resources that would be relevant to employers. It's a great place to start as an employer. We've kind of created sections of that page that might be relevant, like processing accommodation requests for hiring. So this slide shows some examples of the resources that you'll find on that employers page. For example, our practical guide to reasonable accommodation during the hiring process. We also have some sample forms that might be helpful for managing accommodation requests for the hiring process, sample reasonable accommodation statements for the hiring process. So again, these are just sort of examples to give you an idea of what you might find there. Another segment of that page is processing accommodation requests for employees. So helping you understand the definition of disability under the ADA, knowing what the steps are in the ADA interactive process. We do produce a lot of information or topic resources on medical documentation and medical inquiries because we get a lot of questions on that topic. So you'll find a lot of practical guidance on that particular topic, and those resources are included on that employer's page as a start. You'll also find information on developing policies and procedures. So if you are interested in working on your policies and procedures, you'll find some links to some resources to help you with that there. Here we just have a couple of a few examples to consider related to practical tips and making a statement about reasonable accommodation and EEO statements that you might consider, sample forms, and then we also have a workplace accommodation toolkit that offers some best practices. If you're an individual, we also have a page dedicated to resources for you. A lot of times individuals might be seeking information about their rights under the ADA, how to disclose a disability and request an accommodation at work. And so we have developed a lot of resources to help work through that process, including sample forms that might help them go ahead and write a request for accommodation letter. And also even information to help them work with their healthcare or other appropriate professional to create documentation to support their accommodation request. So there's a lot of really useful information there. I mentioned the A to Z quite a bit, but I just wanted to kind of give you some examples of what you'll find there. When you first go to that A to Z page, the first tab that you'll see is to search by disability. Here you'll find a list of health conditions that you can click on and then find information on key accommodation solutions, some ADA information around those types of health conditions. This is not a comprehensive list of all types of health conditions. It is also not an indicator of what might be an ADA disability. So know that we create this content based on sort of common impairments that we hear about. And so that list is more related to common types of health conditions and disabilities that people are contacting us for consultation. So, and it's something that grows. We do add impairments to that list, but do know that if you do not find a particular health condition there and you need consultation on it, you can still contact us. We encourage you to do that. So don't use it as the only possible resource. You will also find that you can search for information by specific limitation, by a work-related function, by topic. I really like the by topic page, and then also by types of accommodations as well. So every page that you'll find there is a little bit different in terms of the kind of information you'll find, but it's a great place to kind of explore the JAN site. I mentioned I really like the topic page because if you are charged with processing accommodation requests or a people leader or someone in HR, it's helpful to look for information regarding specific accommodation topics. So, for example, we have some pages dedicated to information about leave as an accommodation or reassignment or telework, providing temporary accommodations, things like that. So it's a great place to explore various accommodation and ADA topics. Earlier, I mentioned that ADA library that we have. There, you'll find information regarding the various titles of the ADA, but of course, our focus at JAN is on the employment Title I provisions of the law. There, you'll find various resources. I would say of all of the resources listed there, probably the most helpful, again, are those EEOC enforcement guidance documents because they really help you work through figuring out how to apply the ADA in a very practical way. So that's a great place to go ahead and access a curated list of those enforcement guidance resources. I briefly mentioned a second ago our workplace accommodation toolkit. This is a toolkit that Jan offers on our employers page, and it basically is a comprehensive online resource that is for employers who are seeking to go maybe beyond ADA compliance in terms of creating an inclusive work environment and making sure you have up-to-date policies and procedures. It covers some best practices. It is set up in a way that it creates drawers for various types of audiences. So maybe you are a manager or supervisor, maybe you're an accommodation subject matter expert, perhaps an information technology expert. So you'll find there that there are various drawers depending upon who you are and what information might be useful to you. So that's another place to kind of explore a little bit and find a lot of different information around accommodation topics. You'll also find links to role play videos to help with training supervisors and managers, as well as some sample forms and policies that can be helpful. Another sort of tool that Jan offers is our MyJan portal. The MyJan portal is just a handy little tool that we have available on the Jan site that allows users to organize any Jan web page available at askjan.org. And you can do that in 3 different categories: accommodation, legal, and other. It basically offers easy access to your most frequently used JAN resources. I mentioned, the site is very extensive, and so sometimes we might come across a resource and then not be sure how to find it later on. If you find something that you want to keep coming back to, it might be a good idea to go ahead and start that MyJan portal. It's you could set it up with an email. It's a free portal that's available to you, and it basically allows you to kind of save JAN web pages in one place where you can go to. You can enter that MyJan portal to go ahead and find those pages later on. So kind of think of it as a little bit of an electronic filing cabinet, I would say. You can only save pages that are that are created by Jan on the Jan site, but it's a handy dandy little tool for organization. Also, accommodation in compliance training solutions. So we do offer various webcasts and modules that you can take advantage of in your leisure. We have a webcast series that is currently a monthly series, and we have a couple of sessions left in the year. It's something that we offer on various accommodation and ADA topics. I believe that the remainder of the sessions for this year are all booked. However, you don't have to attend the live session. We do record them and we make them available in our webcast series library after the recording. So if there's something that you saw in this series that you weren't able to get into, don't worry. You can certainly access the library later on and view the webcast when you have time for that. And we do archive, I think we have about 3 years worth of the webcast series sessions in there that you can access at any time. And then there are some other e-learning modules and training resources that you can take advantage of. I mentioned some role play videos earlier, so we have some videos in there that are helpful for managers and supervisors, where we also have, we provide PowerPoints to go along with those video modules, and you can use those actually to create your own training as well, and we do encourage that. We also have a solution showcase on our YouTube channel where we have some videos around specific types of equipment or accommodations and how they might be used. So that can be helpful too for sort of learning about accommodations. And then I will just sort of finish up with mentioning NDEAM, so National Disability Employment Awareness Month. We'll be celebrating NDEAM in October. So every year in October is NDEAM, and it basically is an opportunity to celebrate the contributions that America's workers with disabilities bring to the workforce. It's a good opportunity to kind of demonstrate your inclusive employment practices and basically look at the ways that people with disabilities contribute to the workforce. That month is themed every year, and so the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy comes up with the theme every year. This year, it's Advancing Access and Equity, and they do produce a poster that is available for download, or you can also order them to post in your workplace. With that, they also believe that there's a poster online that you can go ahead and customize. So if you'd like to add your organization's logo and information to the poster so that you can go ahead and have that represented in your workplace, that's something available to you. So for more information on that, you can go to dol.gov/NDEAM or NDEAM. So yeah, we'll be celebrating NDEAM all October long, and on Jan's social media, you'll find a lot of information related to NDEAM and ways that you can celebrate. So hop on there and watch for those updates. So I'll just end with, if you have more questions, if you're looking for more information, if you're looking for assistance with consultation, just know that Jan is here for you. You can ask us, we can help. And we hope that you will contact us and follow us for more information. I do know, Latasha, that there were some questions that were presented to me prior to the to the presentation, and I wasn't
Mhm.
sure if you wanted to pose those to me or if you wanted me to kind of go through those quickly.
Whatever works, we could just go through them. Let me pull those up and I could maybe ask while you answer. So one
Okay,
second.
sure.
I know you touched on responses to some of them with the MyJan and things like that. So that was
Right.
great. Okay, here we are. Okay, is there a limit to how long calls can be when contacting Jan for assistance with an ADA issue? For instance, this person was thinking specifically of complex issues that can run long with trying to explain what's going on. Is there any point where the representatives would be working to wrap up the calls?
So, we again, we kind of meet you wherever you are, and some calls
Mhm.
take longer than others, right? So, we try to do our best to get all of the information we can from you, to have a good dialogue back and forth to ensure that we are able to answer your questions as best we can. There are some situations where we might need to do a little bit of research, and we might need to wrap up the call in order to go ahead and conduct that research and then ultimately follow up with you. There's not sort of a limit to the number of minutes that we give you, but do know we are very busy. So, we're not necessarily going to sit there for 2 hours on a consultation, but I will say there's been times where that might have happened.
Mhm.
So there's not a limit, to answer the question. There are times where we might need to wrap up the call. We might also be at a point where we realize we've done everything we can in that moment to assist you. Sometimes it means that you might need to go back and gather more information or work toward that situation on your end a bit more and come back later on. So everything's case by case, and it's a very customized type situation in terms of that consultation.
Okay, and this sort of bounces off what you were saying about there needing to be follow-up sometimes.
Mhm.
Let's say the issue was so complex that you all have provided the assistance, but a week or two later, something else happens, they need to reach out again. Would it be possible for them to reach the same representative, or do you all keep notes from certain contacts? And so whoever assists that person, would they be able to assist them?
Yeah, that is possible. Absolutely. And there are a few ways to go about that. So, it might be that if you do decide that you need to call back and you want to talk about the same situation, you can certainly ask to speak with that particular consultant again. If they're available, they'll be happy to go ahead and work with you. Sometimes it's nice that continuity is nice because they're already familiar with the situation. There might be times where that person is not available and someone else could help. So, if that's the case and you really do want to have your question answered at that time, feel free to talk with somebody else. That's not a problem. They do have the ability to go back and look at the note from the previous contact. So, we do keep notes. And so that can, so all of our consultants can go back and look at the previous notes to help with a little bit of context in that situation. So, it is possible. Now, to that end, too, I want to make clear, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, our service is entirely confidential. So, whereas we do keep notes and we keep that information isn't available to anyone outside of the JAN organization. So, and in fact, someone from your organization couldn't contact us and say, well, I know you talked to Joe yesterday. I want to know what you talked about. We can't do that. Our service is entirely confidential.
Okay. And one more question, and then I see a couple that came through chat. So you offer other options for reaching out to you all, chat, sending emails. Would those normally result in a phone call if you all see that it's a complex issue? Like, what's most appropriate for the chat or the emails?
So, let me look at all three of the contacts because the chat is great because obviously you can it's real time. What we're able to do during the chat is go ahead and pull in specific resources on the Jan site or other pages that are relevant, give those to you right away, which is very nice. And then we can ultimately send you a transcript so that you have all that documented and you can go back and look at those links later on if you need to. So it's great, and I think you can probably you can get as complex as you need to, in that situation. Obviously, with a call, there's a lot of back and forth, and I think it is very nice because you can. Sometimes there are nuances in a situation, and until you're in that conversation asking a lot of questions, you might not get to all those nuances. So I think that can be really helpful. If you know it's going to be a complicated situation, I would probably suggest calling or using the chat as opposed to just sending an email. With email, it can get lengthy and there can be a lot of having to go back and forth because we do have to ask a lot of questions to really provide the most appropriate information. So if it's complex, I would say call or chat. If you have what might be a simple question, go ahead and email it in. That's no problem. We will get back to you as quickly as possible. So with our emails, generally, we will try to get back to you within, 24 hours, most likely. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer if we've had a really high volume of contacts in a day. I'll just make note that I mentioned we're a small service, and we have I think about 10 consultants, and we handle around 42,000 contacts a year. So we do stay very busy.
Wow,
Yeah.
sounds like
So,
it.
yeah.
Okay.
I will also mention that if you do call us or chat with us, sometimes there is that follow up afterwards. There's also times where if you chat in or call in, someone might not be available right at that time. We will get back to you. So please do leave a message, and we will either call or email you. There, if you have a preference one way or the other, you can let us know.
Mhm.
But we will get back to you.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so other questions was about receiving a copy of the presentation. I know you and I discussed that, and you'll will be sharing your
Yes.
slides. So thank you for that.
Mhm.
Another question, can organizations book a training for their HR team with Jan?
Yes, you absolutely can. Again, we have a small training staff, and so we do request a lot of advance notice. So if you know that you have an interest in having training, we do ask that you try to contact us 3 to 4 months in advance if that's possible. On our homepage at askjan.org, you'll find a training tab at the top. I would go ahead and click on that, and you can kind of look at the trainings that we have currently available as recorded trainings. But if you're looking for a live training, we will do that virtually. We try to do that for audiences of 50 people or more. We can't so much customize training. So what we'll do is try to get a feel for what you're looking for. And if we have available training on that, then we'll go ahead and offer it. So my best advice would be to call or email. You'll end up talking to me first. I'm our training coordinator. So we can go ahead and figure out what your training needs are and what we're able to do.
Okay,
And all
wonderful.
of that is free because all the services we provide are free of charge.
Okay, wonderful. I see a couple of other questions came in. For the sake of time, we'll try to wrap it up maybe in the next minute. So if you're able to quickly provide some information, Tracy, that'd be great. But if we need to, if I need to get the questions to you, then you give a response and I include it in the follow-up, I'll do that. One person asked about, is there any information, as far as you're aware of, on your site about employees who are sensitive to electromagnetic frequencies in the workplace? I've not heard of that. That's new.
Actually, we do have something on our A to
Wow.
Z. Yeah, it's not, it's not something we get a lot of inquiries about, but enough that we did produce a page on that. So
Okay.
go to the A to Z section and you will find, I believe it's let me see if I can find it actually. I believe it's under electromagnetic, but let me take a look real quickly and I can tell you for sure. Electrical sensitivity.
Okay, wonderful. And the last question was about contact information, but I'm sure they could probably find that going to askjan.org.
Yeah, just go to
And okay,
exactly. Go to askjan.org, and you will easily see on the homepage our phone number, or the live chat button. All you need to do is click it. If you'd like to email, you'll also go to the top right, and it will say contact, and you go there, and it makes it really easy.
wonderful. Well, that's it for the questions. Tracy, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the information. I'm one person I've used Jan for years and I've always found you all so helpful. I knew once you covered the information, you probably mentioned some stuff I wasn't aware of. I didn't know you had a newsletter, didn't know you had a
Oh
YouTube
yeah.
channel. I've seen some things that you offer on YouTube. I didn't know you had your own channel. So
Yeah.
I'll definitely be checking those things out. I'm sure the other audience members are walking away with some information thinking, I'm going to use this and this, and I'm going to check that out. So thank you so much for your time, Tracy. We
Thanks for the
appreciate it.
opportunity. We appreciate it. So we hope that y'all check us out. And just to mention,
Definitely.
Latasha, too, with the YouTube channel, that's also where we post all of our webcasts.
Oh,
So
good.
so if you go to that YouTube channel, and you can find it easily from our homepage, if you under our social media box, there's a little icon there to click on to go to our YouTube page, or at the bottom of the homepage. So just so you can
Okay.
all get there easily. All right, you will have a
Wonderful.
great rest of your meeting, and
You too.
I'll be talking with you soon.
All
Thanks.
right. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Tracy. Bye. Okay, everyone. So next up, we have Kim Oliver, the Workers' Comp Program Officer. Kim, I will bring up the slides and I'll advance as you tell me to. So 1 second. All right, Kim, turn it over to you.
All right, you can go ahead and go to the next one. I'm going to try to make up some time and get you guys back on schedule.
Oh, take your time.
Okay, I didn't know how
If
rushed you
we
were.
need to adjust, I'll adjust because I know there were some people who really wanted to hear the information you offer. So if
Okay,
there needs to be any, shortening things, working through, I'll do it on my end. So definitely take your time.
okay, great. So I just wanted to come on camera really quick, just in case those of you that might have known me as Kim Kramer can make the connection that I'm now Kim Oliver. But I am going to turn my camera off when I do virtual presentations. I have the presentation up on my phone and on my computer in case my dogs start going crazy. I can run to a quiet area. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off for the presentation. But there's been a lot of changes in workers' compensation over the past couple of years, definitely. But one of the things that we have been tasked with by the governor's office and the Office of Planning and Budget is to revitalize the return to work plan that we had implemented years back. I wasn't even working at DOAS when that return to work strategy was launched. I think it was launched in 2008 or 2010. And at that time, I was working for GAS, which is the contractor that handles the workers' compensation claims for DOAS. So I didn't come over to the state until 2014. We had always had these 3 tiers, tier 1 being safety, tier 2 is medical, and tier 3 is recovery. So I just want to point out that the tier titles remain the same, but we are making a lot of changes under each one of those. So starting with safety, we have a comprehensive loss control program. We can provide a slew of training for your agency, do on-site inspections, ergonomical evaluations, whatever it is that might be needed at your particular location. I would highly encourage you to reach out to the comprehensive loss control folks to see if that might not be a service they can provide to the agency free of charge. Currently, right now, we have 4 resources under the comprehensive loss control program. CG Lawrence, he's been with us for years. You might know him. Hiram, same thing, but we do have 2 new ones that came over to us from Department of Transportation with a long history over at DOT. So they are very knowledgeable and skilled as well. According to the governor's initiative, we are looking to expand this program to our target is 10 individuals. And the reason is that these 4 individuals currently service the entire state of Georgia, all agencies, and it's just not feasible for them to be running around to every single state agency location to do their annual inspections that they're required to do. One of the other things that was developed under the CLCP program was called self-assessment. Self-assessment was developed and can be found through the IRM portal, which I'll talk to you about a little bit later. But essentially what it does is it goes to the highest level contact at every agency, and they then have to delineate that down internally within their agency to answer certain questions about what the agency is doing to keep a safe workplace, what resources they provide to their employees, all kinds of things that come into this assessment. At the end of it, it gives them an assessment score, like a safety score, if you will. And part of that assessment is whether they have received workers' compensation training. I bring this up because that score that is assigned under the self-assessment is going to be what Office of Planning and Budget will be evaluating and reviewing to determine whether they are going to charge an assessment to an agency when it comes time for your premiums for premium payout, or if you're going to get a credit for complying not only with the safety program, but also with return to work and getting people back to work. So that's why I bring that up. It's very important. It's a new path that we're taking. I'm not sure when these assessments or penalties are going to start being charged to the premium allocations, but my suspicions it's going to be in the very next year after this current year's premiums. Those have already gone out and been billed. But so for FY25, I'm thinking that's when we're going to see that assessment either positive or negative. So I just want to bring that up. You can go ahead to the next slide. Thank you. Tier 2 is care. It's always been care. Like I said, the titles haven't changed, but I just wanted to give a quick recap of what workers' compensation offers under the law. We, of course, pay any medical bills as they relate to the injury. We encourage injured workers to please not give their health insurance information when they report for medical treatment. I know that can be kind of a challenge, but here recently, especially in the last couple of weeks, we've had some injured workers who are getting turned over to collections because their work comp bills are going to them directly and not coming to us through the program. We can get that corrected. However, as you all might imagine, once health insurance is paid, when we send our request for medical records and billing to the medical provider, they pull up the account, they see it's been paid, and they kind of disregard our request for records. So it takes a lot of effort to get them to reverse that, pay back the health insurance, pay back the injured worker for any copay that they might have paid at the time of the visit, and then get us billed so that we can get them paid. So please try not to give your personal health insurance when you go to the doctor, or at least make it very clear to them that this is workers' compensation. You can pull some information off of our website to provide an injured worker with the billing address for work comp. That's typically what they're wanting. If you don't have it handy when an injured worker is calling saying that they want some claim information, just go ahead and give them your agency location address, and then you all can get those bills over to us and we can at least get them processed under the work comp program. Lost income benefits, of course, is still 66.667% of your salary. It is taken off the 13 weeks worth of wages prior to the date of injury and cannot include the week of injury. So if we are being paid on the 1st and the 15th and you get hurt on the 11th, we're going to go back to the prior month's last paycheck. And then I need 6 paycheck stubs to constitute the 13 weeks worth of wages. If it falls on a leap year, then we'll need 7 paycheck stubs. So if you just want to be safe when you're working with your adjuster and the workers' compensation, if you just print off 7 paycheck stubs for that injured worker and get them over to us, we should be able to complete those forms for you and get them filed with the State Board of Work Comp. Right. Recovery is considered, I put PPD in there, as permanent partial disability. Typically, you're going to get this question from an injured worker when they have elected to use their leave and not get paid by workers' comp. And then all of a sudden they're getting a check in the mail from us and it's labeled PPD or permanent partial disability. That's going to be a medical disability rating that the physician assigns to the injured worker if we cannot return them to pre-injury status. So let's say, for example, they have a knee surgery. The physician gets in there, he sees that there's a lot more damage than he anticipated, and he's not able to repair the knee like he had originally hoped. And therefore, the injured worker is not going to have full range of motion. They're not going to have full strength. They could potentially have some physical limitations on what they can do with their knee, squatting, bending, kneeling, things like that. The doctor then has a duty to assign an impairment rating. It's not a settlement, it's just an impairment rating, a disability rating that to us, and then they let us know we have 20 days to pay that out to the injured worker. We are required to pay that weekly. We cannot give them a lump sum payment for the permanent partial disability unless it's 10 weeks worth of benefits or less. Anything outside of 10 weeks of benefits is going to have to be paid weekly until it's paid in full. So sometimes they'll get a check from us even though they had elected to get their leave through their lost time. So that might be what that's for, and you can help explain that to them. Rehabilitation is not something that the state of Georgia considers as far as getting people back to work. Unfortunately, there's no statute or any provision in the Work Comp Act to let us kind of force an injured worker back to work. We have to get their cooperation. So if they are injured to the point that they cannot return to the job that they were working at the time of injury, and they maybe need to consider a career change or do something different, we can work with them in that respect, but we cannot force them to become employed by another employer if they don't want to. So that is kind of the downfall. However, if you have a catastrophic injury, meaning that you've lost a limb, you have traumatic brain injury, you have a spinal cord injury that puts you in a wheelchair or something like that, then we do have rehabilitation benefits for those injured workers. And what that means is we have to assign a nurse case manager, a catastrophic nurse case manager to those injured workers for the lifetime of their claim or until such point they can no longer impact the claim. So that nurse is going to go with that injured worker to every medical appointment, communicate with them, make sure they know where they need to be, how they're going to get there. They arrange all of that. It's kind of like a nursemaid, if you will. So we have those benefits for catastrophic injuries. Of course, we have death benefits if somebody loses their life in the line of work. We pay benefits to the remaining spouse and or dependents. So there is that benefit as well. I put in the 877 number that you can call to report workers' compensation injury. But we don't want you to report those unless they need to see a doctor or they're asking to see a doctor. So in one of those two situations, you do want to report the claim to DOAS. But if it's just an incident only, they feel like they want to rest, ice, elevate over a weekend, see if it doesn't calm down, then we just need you to do all your normal paperwork. Just go ahead and keep it in-house until such time they might come to you and say, you know, I've tried resting, relaxing, it's not getting any better. I think I do need to see a doctor. That's when you're going to call the claim into workers' compensation. The paperwork for an incident only should be kept in-house for at least a year. Injured workers have the right to seek medical treatment for a known injury up to 1 year after the date of incident. So if you're aware of an injury or an incident at the job site, and they come back 6 months later and say they want to go to the doctor, we have to give them that opportunity. Of course, we're going to question those claims a lot more thoroughly than we would, you know, a normal medical only claim where treatment is sought in the first 48 hours, for example. Go ahead, ma'am. Thank you. So what's considered an on-the-job injury or illness? I told you there's been a lot of changes in workers' compensation, and not to our benefit, I will say. Stereotypically, the definition for workers' compensation across all jurisdictions that I've ever handled has always been arising out of and in the course and scope of employment. You'll notice that the and scope is no longer there. The reason for that is because we had a 2021 Henry County Board of Education versus Rutledge, where an employee suffered a heart attack on the job site and his claim was denied, and that went all the way up to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals ruled that while he wasn't necessarily in the scope of his employment at the time that the heart attack was suffered, the conditions of employment were still a quote unquote contributing factor. So now they have dropped the and scope part of the definition, and currently as it stands, if you have a heart attack, stroke, heat exhaustion, anything like that, where your employment could be considered a contributing factor to the medical event, then we are potentially going to have exposure under the Workers' Compensation Act. So that is a really big change. Also, there was another case law in 2020, Fret versus State Farm, where an employee was on a break, taking their lunch. It was a break where they clocked out and were kind of on their own time. However, they stayed on the employer's premises when they engaged in their break, and they suffered an injury. Used to be historically that we could always deny those claims. You're free to spend your time how you choose to. Your employer doesn't have anything to do with how you spend your time during a break. That has all changed. It's the lunch break exception as we knew it just no longer applies if the employee remains on the employer's premises during the break. However, it's going to be very fact specific. So if you have incidences like that, we're really going to need your assistance to get as many details as we can regarding what they were doing, how they were injured, take pictures of the scene, get witness statements. I mean, everything that you can think of to provide to us will make us be able to make a better decision about whether it's a compensable claim or not. We are trying our very best to keep our taxpayers' dollars down. The work comp program at DOAS historically, on average, costs taxpayers $100 million per year. So this is a big, big number. And then with this change, I want to do everything I can to just keep our number where it is and not go up even further. Yes, I see the little eyeballs face. You're right. That was my thoughts exactly. However, some of the other caveats to this are traveling to and from work. Your normal commute is not covered. So if you are injured in a motor vehicle accident when you are traveling to and from work, that will be denied. However, if you are traveling for a conference or someplace other than your normal office, which would mean that it's not your normal commute, then you're going to have coverage from the time that you leave your house to wherever it is that you're going. So keep that in mind. Conferences can carry a little bit of exposure. If an employee is not able to return to their own home at the end of the day and they're put up in a hotel for a couple of days, they are going to have coverage for the entire time that they're at that. I don't want to say resort because none of us make enough money to go to a resort, but you know what I mean. If you have some sort of incident when you're on the premises of that hotel or conference center, you're going to want to report whatever happened to workers' compensation first before you pursue any other form of insurance or coverage. All right. Horseplay is still something that we can stand a denial on. However, if the horseplay has continued to be allowed by a supervisor or a person of higher authority, and then an injury occurs, and now you want me to say that it's denied because of horseplay, that's not going to fly. If you had allowed the horseplay to go on for an extended period of time or even a few weeks, and then you see an injury, that's not going to work. I'm just not going to be able to stand in front of a judge and say, yeah, you know, they never got disciplined for it, but they knew they weren't supposed to be doing it. That isn't enough for the administrative law judge to allow us to stand by a denial. So keep that in mind. All right, next slide. All right, we currently operate under a managed care organization, which essentially is a carve-out network of physicians of Coventry. So we have about 25,000 physicians across the state of Georgia that have agreed to treat state employees who suffer an injury on the job. Those doctors, we don't have the 6 traditional panel that's posted in most employers across the state. I think we are one of 2 entities that operate under a managed care organization. So if you have an injured worker that's talking to their neighbor or their sister or whatever the case might be, chances are they don't understand that we operate under a managed care organization. On a traditional 6-doctor panel that's posted for most employers, they can pick one of those 6 that they want to go to. They can look at the posting on the wall, pick one, call that doctor, go. If that doctor says you need an MRI, you need physical therapy, you need a nerve conduction study, they can go right to that testing facility, have those things done, come back, and it's a smooth process. However, that process causes an employer to lose control of the medical for that injured worker. Under a managed care organization, you go to the doctor that's in the network. You still have the right to pick your doctor. We give you a list of all the doctors in the area, 60-mile radius typically. You can pick who you want to go to. You go to that appointment. Maybe they order that MRI. You can't just go that same day and have that MRI done. The medical records and a utilization review request are required to be submitted to Amerisys, who is our managed care organization provider. They review it for medical necessity, but medical necessity as it relates to the injury. So you might really need an MRI, but the nature of the injury that you had might not have warranted the MRI. It might have been, you know, you just aggravated it a little bit. We might allow the MRI just to define what's pre-existing and what's from this slip and trip, if that's what happened. And then we go from there. So it does allow us to control the costs of the medicals, make sure that everything we are approving to be paid and for them to undergo is related to the injury and is something that workers' compensation considers usual and reasonable as it pertains to the injury. All right. They do help with all the paperwork. They get that back and forth between the adjuster, the doctor, and the contact of the agency that we are asked to send things to. So if you don't see some paperwork that you're needing, please get with your adjuster, let them know, and we need to just bridge that gap between the managed care organization, the physician's office, and your adjuster, as well as you. So go ahead to the next slide, if you don't mind.
All right, Kim, as I advance to the next slide, I see that a question has come in.
Okay.
The question is, are injuries working from home for staff, are they covered? And talking on the phone to staff or manager on job at work on your way to work is, and there's an accident, is this injury covered? I think what they're saying is if the person's on their way to work, they're talking to a manager or someone who's already at work about work, would that energy,
Right.
would that be covered?
Right. Okay. So the teleworking thing I answered in the questions, do you still want me to go over it now?
That
Because I
you
think
don't.
you put that.
Yeah, that is in the questions. There are about 8 questions after Kim's slides that we could briefly touch on, so we can save it for that. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And then just
Okay.
remind me about the motor vehicle accident. But to answer your question, that has come up. I can't speak for every agency, but I know at DOAS we signed something that says we're not going to use our cell phones when we're driving. So we did have an incident where a gentleman was driving into the office and his boss was calling his cell phone. Now, we denied that because he was still in his normal commute. We lost when it went to court. And the reason that we lost was because this particular supervisor or his boss was one of those types of people that would just not leave a voicemail, call right back, call right back, call right back, and get really upset with you for not answering his call, his or her call. So that they were able to show based on phone records that and text messages that the boss made it very clear that you were given a work phone. And because you were given a work phone, you are to answer that work phone and respond whenever he seemed fit. Right. So based on that, we lost in court because his job was in jeopardy if he didn't answer the call. So we did pay for that motor vehicle accident. He was severely injured, so it cost us quite a bit of money. We have just asked, I don't know, Latasha, do we all sign the same forms, right? When we went to home from teleworking.
Yes, I believe so. I
I
remember. Yes.
Yeah, so I remember they made us sign something that said, even though I'm teleworking, the office is still considered the Sloppy Floyd building. So if I'm going from home to the office, I'm still considered my normal commute. But we have had some agencies that revised their policies and said that each person's home was now their quote unquote office. So then when they were required to drive into their old offices, like their building where, is now vacant or whatever, for a staff meeting in person, that commute then became like a conference
And
because they
there's
made
something in
their
FLSA
home.
that covers it. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to bring that up. Just be mindful of all those things. So, okay, real quick, the Georgia activity analysis. Traditionally in the past, this is not a form that I pressed. You can go ahead to the next slide so they can see what it looks like. However, this is the form that Office of Planning and Budget and the governor's office that I spoke to earlier are going to be looking for when they are auditing agencies for compliance to the return to work program or not. So this is a form that you're going to want to do on every single workers' compensation injury. Currently, what I told you was changing is the managed care organization that we work with. They hired 6 return to work specialists, and they're kind of strategically placed throughout the state of Georgia, like the loss control guys are. They each handle like a geographic region. So these return to work specialists are working with the agencies as we're launching the return to work initiative to develop Georgia activity analysis based on the job titles at every position within an agency. So therefore, when an injured worker gets hurt, you just open your electronic filing cabinet, say, okay, they are a receptionist. Here's the Georgia activity analysis for a receptionist. And you just briefly read over it, make sure it's applicable to that specific employee, and then send it out the door with them as they head out to the doctor. Meanwhile, we are doing the same thing on our side. And the reason that we're doing that is just to ensure that we're making our best effort to get the Georgia activity analysis to the physician at the time they see the injured worker. So after the initial medical treatment, the medical service, emergency room, urgent care, or just a one-time appointment with a physician, we really only need you to send this form at that first visit, because after that, we're going to handle it for you. We're going to have the Georgia activity analysis, and we can just use it again and again every time they go to the doctor. So we're asking for cooperation from agencies in that regard to help us comply with that. The other thing that the return to work specialists are doing is coming out to the facilities, doing an investigation to determine if there could potentially be any other modified duty or light duty that the agency is not recognizing, and are they considering their folks who are out of work because modified duty cannot be accommodated, are they considering those folks for the maybe 2 or 3 week task that could constitute modified duty, but isn't necessarily a job position within that agency? I hope that makes sense. If not, raise your hand or something so I know. But those are the efforts that we're taking. It's not going to be too impactful for DOAS or agencies that are structured like DOAS, but we're working, our pilot agencies that we were given to start this project was DJJ, Department of Corrections, DVHDD, and some CSBs that we're working with. So you can imagine those types of agencies are going to probably really appreciate the assistance and guidance. And we are really trying to take the heavy hand of the work. We're not trying to create any more work for any other agency. So we're trying to do it all ourselves as best we can, but we do need cooperation and a point of contact that we can work with when we do have questions. So those are some of the things that we're working on. After we get through the pilot agencies, this is going to be launched to every agency in the state by the time it's all said and done. So just want to let you know that's coming. If you hear about it, that's kind of what's going on. Go ahead to the next slide if you don't mind.
All right, and while I advance, I see one other question. Are workers' comp specialists not allowed to provide the employer with return to work documents?
Our return to work specialists.
Workers'
The 6
comp
folks.
specialists. Mm-hmm.
Right. So I just want to be clear, they're asking about the return to work specialist with the Amerisys and not the adjuster.
All right, I see Javon, you asked that question. If you could let us know. He said with DOAS.
With, I still, can you come on so I can hear you and ask, help
Let
me
see
understand.
if I can.
I don't know what he means by that, because DOAS would be like my role, but I don't get too involved with that. But DOAS is kind of considered the adjusters, but they are GAS employees. So I'm not sure what role he means exactly.
All right, Javon,
Hello.
I have changed
Yes.
so you can talk with us. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
And how you doing today?
I'm good.
It may be with, you stated with GAS.
Yes, the adjusters.
It may be with them. I know usually we have some incidents where we're not aware of when the employee may go in for follow-up visits or go in and we get a message that states, has anything changed with their status from their previous visit, and we weren't aware of the visit. So we were kind of figuring out, trying to, have communication about, do we get updated when they go to the position and then they have a return to work status saying, yeah, they have these limitations or they're good to go or whatever. We're not usually getting those all the time.
Okay. So that was one of the questions that came up in my 8 questions, but I understand the question now. Thank you for clarifying. The employee still has an employer-employee relationship responsibility. So if they're missing work or they're leaving work to go to a medical appointment and it's workers' compensation, they are supposed to bring their employer any paperwork that they might be given at the doctor's office and turn it in, just like they would do if they had a personal injury that had nothing to do with work. You would still be required to provide your employer with a work status slip that confirms what your capabilities are after that doctor's appointment. So that's my first thing that I always like to say. Just because you have a work comp injury doesn't negate their responsibilities to report their status to their employer. But second, the doctors typically hand the injured worker or the actual physical return to work slip as they leave the medical practice. They then forward sometimes they forward it with the bill and the records, which, you know, could take, depending on the medical office, anywhere from the next day to 60 days before we get it. But the nurses, the return to work, the nurses and the revitalization under this project, everybody's going to be trying to get that work status slip, because that's one of the biggest things I have seen as I've been going out. I've pretty much got DOC done. And throughout DOC, I noticed that really the breakdown in communication was not where I thought it was. I thought it was going to be between the nurses, the adjuster, and the employer. That's not where we were seeing the breakdown. We're seeing the breakdown from the doctor to all of us. So what they're doing is they're going out to the medical offices where that's a problem, and they're getting it addressed. And we've already noticed a difference in the turnaround. So if you have that type of a situation, I think the best thing to do, just to prevent harassing or potentially being perceived as harassing the injured worker, is to call your adjuster and see if we've got it. If we don't got it, then we're going to ask the nurse case manager and the return to work specialist to help us get it. That's kind of the new approach that we're taking. So I hope that answers your question. All right. If it doesn't, let me know at the end when we go over the list
thanks.
of questions.
It does.
Okay,
It
you're
does.
welcome.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure, and I just shared that we do inform the employee on it. For I guess it's, you know, those scenarios where I guess the ball drop. I guess you want to say they don't provide it to us. So I guess we were just looking at another way of, you know, as a
Getting
backup,
it.
I guess.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely reach out to us first, the adjuster and your nurse case manager. Well, actually, just your adjuster, and then we'll handle it from there and get it for you, get it back. One thing that also changed this past July was the comp rates. You'll see on this current slide that it's gone up to $800 per week. So that doesn't mean that everybody gets $800 per week. It just means that people that are in a high salary position, you know, your CFOs, your commissioners, deans, anything like that, where they're 13 weeks worth of wages, that total times that 66.667% equals a value higher than $800 a week. Then their benefits will be capped at that $800 per week. We can't pay them any more than that. Same thing goes for the temporary partial disability rate. The temporary partial disability, that's going to be paid when folks maybe are released to return to work 4 hours a day instead of 8. So you guys are paying them 4 hours, we're paying the other 4 hours. If those 4 hours calculate out to more than $533, then we wouldn't owe them anything more than that $533. So that's something new. Also, with this return to work revitalization and the leave election form, hopefully most of you have used the leave election form, but if you haven't, please give it to every injured worker, even if you do not anticipate them missing work. And the reason for that is because the state personnel board rules, which are totally separate from workers' compensation, have a clause in there, a provision in there that indicates if we are going to be out of work for any reason, work comp, personal, you know, funeral in the family, whatever the case might be, that we are to be offered the leave election form to confirm how we want to be paid during that time. So I would just ask that it's used on every single work comp claim that you've got. And it's just going to say, it gives them 3 options. I want to be paid my leave while I'm out of work until my leave is exhausted. I want to do no leave. I'm saving my leave for something. So please pay me work comp benefits. We can do that. There is a 7-day waiting period in Georgia that we do not pay unless an employee has been out of work for 7 days or more by the authorized treating physician. So on day 8, we would start making weekly payments. The first 7 days is reimbursed if you are out of work for 21 consecutive days. Again, it has to be by the authorized treating physician. So then come day 22, you would get 2 checks that week, one for the 7-day waiting period and one for the current week. Okay, their other option is they can break it up. They can elect to use their leave for the 7-day waiting period and then go on workers' comp, or mix and match it as they want to as they go throughout the claim. They just have to have a new leave election form every time they change their mind about how they want to be paid. And then that'll keep you in compliance with the state personnel board rules and workers' compensation, and let everybody know how somebody's being paid. All right, I think that's it on that slide. The big one, return to work. We've kind of already talked about this. You can return to work in a couple different ways. Regular duty is pretty obvious. They're given a full duty work status by their authorized treating physician. Again, if this is an employee that's bringing those full duty work slips straight to you, please make sure your adjuster has that as fast as possible. Although I imagine, for full duty, the only time we have to serve a form to the injured worker is if they've kind of gone MIA or it's unclear whether they're going to come back to work. In cases like that where we can't reach or confirm that they're going back to work, we have to serve a 10-day notice advising them that we've got a full duty work status slip and they've got 10 days before their benefits are cut off. So to serve that form as timely as possible, we just need to make sure we all have the full duty work status so that we can serve the form. Modified or light duty is going to be what we're talking about with that return to work revitalization. We're really asking agencies to be more, what's the word I want to use, creative when it comes to placing somebody in a modified duty position. It doesn't have to be an official position. It can just be a task. For us at DOAS, when we went to paperless, we had poor Pam Terrell. I don't know if any of you that knew her, but she was one of the people that was tasked to scanning all of our paper stuff into an electronic filing cabinet. I mean, something like that. There's a lot of agencies across the state that are not paperless yet, or that have a backlog of those types of duties that somebody on an injury with modified duty could easily help them out with. So those are some of the things we're looking about. Accommodations isn't necessarily somebody that's like for me, I guess for me, for example, I had knee surgery when I was in my 20s. It was not workers' comp, but it was a motor vehicle accident. And my employer accommodated me by giving me, actually just turned a trash can upside down and put my leg up because I had to elevate my leg 15 minutes every hour. I went back to work very quickly after my surgery. And that was one of the things that I had to do when I made that agreement with the doctor to go back to work sooner than he wanted me to. So those are types of things. And of course, the ADA you've heard about earlier, those are the types of things we're talking about there with accommodations. Lastly, termination. Unfortunately, it's just never a good idea to terminate somebody on workers' compensation, but sometimes we have no choice. Just be mindful that if somebody is terminated while they're on work comp and they're out of work, we owe them up to 400 weeks worth of benefits from the date of injury. The 400 weeks starts with the date of injury. I mentioned earlier that there's no rehab in Georgia, so we cannot retrain them for some other job or anything like that. So they could theoretically just sit at home and cash those checks for 400 weeks. So keep in mind.
Kim, I know you're at the end of your part. We have about 3 minutes remaining. So if we could
I am
wrap.
done. I think I'm done.
Okay.
Go for it. I think
All
that's
right.
it, right? Next slide should be just resources.
And so do check out the resources, everyone. If needing to take a look at what else is available. There were, as Kim touched on, 8 questions that were received regarding workers' comp. So they are listed after her slides. You'll have an opportunity to take a look when the slides are sent to you. Of course, if there's any follow-up, you have Kim's email address. You can reach out. Kim, I do see another question came in. I'll just include that when I send you an email and follow up to the training. I'll just send you that question and any others that we receive. But so that everyone who's in the audience can see some of the questions that were received, I'll just briefly touch on those. This one asks, when employees have a workers' comp claim, does DOAS provide the agency contact with a copy of the work status, or must the employee complete a release? You see the answer there. You'll have an opportunity to take a look. If DOAS provides the agency contact with the information, how soon after the claim is filed can the contact expect something? So you see the information for that. There are also questions about, oh, this one's a comment, number 3. Number 4,
It's a
let's see,
teleworking one.
teleworking one. And I see that
Mhm.
someone had asked that during the session. So you see the response to that. Then also, what about someone who has a workers' comp claim that about a mental condition, not one that's physical? So you see the response to that as well. Very interesting one there. Is there anything we can do on our ends if the information from workers' comp physicians continues to be vague? And we did receive another question about that during the session, so you'll see the response to that. Then there were 2 more. How long can an employee be on workers' comp? Kim had touched on that. And just a question about trends, and Kim provide information here as well. So very good information. Thank you, Kim, for your time and your flexibility with
Sorry, I
just
went
ensuring
over.
you went over everything. Oh, that's fine. I'd rather they hear what's needed than us just rush, leave some things out. So thank you so much for your time, Kim. Definitely appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. You're welcome.
All right, so at this point, everyone, what I'll do, since we just have a minute remaining, there clearly won't be enough time for me to get into my information. Since we'll be doing these trainings quarterly, I'll just share my scenarios at the next quarterly training that we offer. And there isn't anything in the scenarios that is immediate that you have to hear right now. So it can wait till we have the next quarterly training. We're looking to have that around early to mid-December, just so that we're sticking with the every 3-month schedule. Everyone, thank you for your time and attention. A lot of good information today. We look forward to other sessions in which we provide more information. I'll tell you, and I'm just gonna skip all the way through mine. There is a link that we have at the very end. Jacob, if you're able to copy that link and put it in a chat so that if anyone has an opportunity to respond before they completely walk away, that would be wonderful. But you'll get a link to the post-training survey. Please complete it. Let us know your thoughts on the material, what you wish you would have heard that you didn't. Of course, I know one will be, well, the scenarios, didn't get into the scenarios, but like I said, we'll do that for next time and any other topics that we plan to cover then. So that marks the end of the training. I see someone asked about, will we share the slides? Yes, I'm glad you asked that, because I mentioned I'd come back to it. In the follow-up that you receive, you'll receive the slides and a recording to both this training and the one from June. I'm going to just automatically do that for the June training as well, because with the June training, I need to update some of the links in that slide and these slides, because we have a new website now. So the links that connected to resources on our site, all of those need to be updated. Also, the recording link that had been provided previously, it was a SharePoint link. Took some time for us to get the YouTube link to work correctly. So I'm just going to send that to everyone, so you'll get both. Thank you, everyone, for your time. If there are some questions we weren't able to cover, submit those through chat. I'll make sure I get them to Kim or Tracy or myself. I look forward to having a chance to meet with you all again at the 3rd quarterly training that we'll have in December. But do take the time, as I said, to complete that survey. The post-meeting survey is like 7 or 8 questions. Let us know what you found valuable, what else you'd like to hear, because I definitely want to make sure these trainings meet your need. Thank you, everybody, for your time and your attention. Have a good day.